On Life and Meaning is brought to you by Blumenthal Performing Arts, celebrating its 25th year presenting the best in performing arts, sharing and employing the arts as a major catalyst to strengthen education, building community cohesiveness, and advancing economic growth. To discover the best in events and performances, visit blumenthalarts.org.
The tip of the pyramid, though, is participation. And so a home run, and something that we would celebrate, is people come to the library, they use the resources to grow, become the best version of themselves, and then they choose to participate in the active civic life of the community. And in the course of that, they and the community become the best version of themselves.
Lenoir Lee Keesler is president and CEO of the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, one of America's leading urban public libraries. Lee provides overall strategic vision, direction, and leadership for the organization and oversight of enterprise administration and library foundation activities. He also serves as relationship manager for the Library-Mecklenburg County Partnership. Prior to joining the library, Lee served as president and CEO of the Arts and Science Council of Charlotte Mecklenburg and in wholesale banking leadership roles for First Union Wachovia Bank. In this episode, we explore leading transformation across an enterprise and the call to community stewardship. I'm Mark Paris, and this is On Life and Meaning. Lee, thanks for joining us.
Happy to do it. Thank you for being here.
This is an exciting time in the library. How would you describe this moment in the library's history?
In one word, probably transformation. From yesterday's library to tomorrow's library. And that's going on, that transformation is going on in many different facets of our business right now.
Can you speak more to that transformation?
Yeah. We did some work in 2015 and 16 that we called Blueprint, but essentially it was in 2025, what will our community be like, and what should we be like in order to serve the community that exists in 2025. So a little bit of skating to the puck, and you know how hard it is to predict things in the future, so we're taking our best shot at what the future looks like. And so we're transforming on a number of different levels. The one that's probably most visible is on the physical level, where we're, after being on the sidelines for several years, we're working on several different branch projects. We'll reopen Morrison Saturday, about less than 48 hours from now. We'll move quickly into renovation of our North County Library early in 2018, and a year later, the renovation expansion of the library at South County. And while all that's going on, we're waiting to move West Boulevard into the renovation path, and then we're working on the main library. And so there's a lot of stuff physical, and part of the main library project is going to be create a new off-site support services center where a number of the functions that exist here today will go. So that's the physical side of things. And there's a lot of other work that we need to do to transform us physically. In terms of the core business, it's becoming much more digital. It's already become much more digital. It will continue down that path. But for those who are concerned or have questions about whether there's still a role for the book. The book will remain our lead product, if you will. But more and more of our business is moving to electronic, and I think we've done a good job of responding to the market and moving in that direction. So we're it's not like we've got a 10-year gap that we're trying to close. The other transformation is going to be on the people side of things, and as the community changes, we need to change so that we can interact with the community on a productive and effective basis. And I'll give you an example. I go every couple of weeks. I go to our University City Library to read from 4 to 5 on now Wednesdays every other week, and I've been doing that for 3 to 3.5 years now. And it's the sanest thing. I tell people it's the sanest thing that I do. But in that period of time, I have read with one white child in 3.5 years. And yesterday I was there and I read with two adorable 6-year-old boys whose family has moved here from China. And neither speaks English today, although they're on a really fast learning curve in terms of picking it up. But their parents were there with them, and their parents are really motivated to help them learn English. But I've read with children from literally all over the world. And so as our community continues to change, we've got to change with it. And, and the simplest ways is we've got to have more books and materials in other languages. Today we have books and materials in 12 languages, but that's going to become even more pronounced. We've got to have staff who can do that. Beyond demographics, we've got to have staff who are more proficient than historically we've been in digital skills and proficiency and the ability to create digital literacy for people who use the library. So there are a number of different ways. We're also we're moving more in the direction of being aligned with our community, and so we will be outside of the library more than we have been in the past. And so we need people who have not only good librarianship skills, but skills to go out into the community.
Lee, when you took the job, you said you wanted to give the community the kind of library it expects. What do you think is the library that our community expects?
That's a great question. And we ask that on a routine basis. I think what the community wants is a library, first of all, that is current with its times in terms of materials, in terms of tools and resources that are available. We're opening at Marson on Saturday. There's a vending machine in Marson where you can punch in your library card number and get a PC or a device out of that to use while you're at the library. So in terms of services that people are looking for, they're looking for more than just the book or the magazine that they may have come into the library to utilize 20 years ago. They're looking for current tools and resources and information. They're also looking for connection. People want to connect with one another. So we have to have spaces that are conducive to that. So I think people are looking for spaces that are comfortable and safe and allow them to interact with others. I think, too, that, well, we know this for a fact, that people want a library system that works with its school system. Nationally, that survey number is 85% of people want their public schools and their public libraries to work together. And then finally, I think the community wants the library to be relevant to the community. And so, for example, strategically, we are much more aligned today than we were 5 years ago, with specific community initiatives, 3 of which are third grade reading. And so the Read Charlotte folks are downstairs in our building here, where we work with them every single day, and we're very aligned with their work, and we've realigned in some cases our work to be aligned with their work, and we've adopted their goal of doubling third grade reading proficiency by 2025. Same thing with digital inclusion. We're aligned with about 20% of the marketplace doesn't have access to the internet at home, so we're working with a number of different organizations to eliminate the digital divide. And then most recently, the economic opportunity work that was been done, and on my desk over here is a remarkable one piece of paper, which is what I asked for, one piece of paper with content on both sides. Essentially, it's the reframing of what we do today, along with some additional programming that speaks to the opportunities and the needs that are addressed in the Economic Opportunity Task Force report. And so strategically, we are much more aligned with the community's needs than just our own sort of interest. And for that reason, I recrafted our mission statement, which says, improve lives, which we've done for a long, long time, and that's sort of Andrew Carnegie 101. But the new part is, and build a stronger community. And so we're equally focused on both sides of that statement. And the work that we're doing to align with the community has been really fulfilling. And I think what people are realizing is that the library is a very relevant and very essential organization in our community, because it can be aligned with so many of these different communities' issues.
Let's talk to that added piece to your mission.
Yeah.
Because historically, libraries have been a third place where you do socialize and you gain access to information. But of course, there are many third places that now offer that, both access to information and socialization. And of course, we're all walking around with iPhones. Tell me more about this added piece that differentiates you from other third places, this building of community.
Yeah. Well, let me mention two places that aren't the place that you're talking about. One is we have an outreach team here, and their role is to go all over our community to deliver library programs. We'll deliver in a given year 25,000 programs, individual programs. 20% of those are delivered by our outreach team. What that demonstrates is that the community can't always come to the library, so we have to go to the community. So that's one way that we go to the community. Another way is virtually, and we have a lot of customers now who never go into a library. They don't have to because they download a book or they go on a database or whatever. The physical part is we also do outreach out of our branches. So that's the if you will, the home base of the activity that goes on. But the work that we've done at Morrison, which is the first work we've done on a physical branch in a while, is going to be a really good example of how we are recreating a space that is not built for books, but is built for people.
I imagine a lot of envisioning went into that redesign. Yeah. At its core, what is a library?
Well, it's a lot of different things, and that's one of the gifts of libraries, and it's also one of the challenges, because we do a lot of different things. You know, we're the place where people plug in electronically. Our Wi-Fi business has grown now to the point where we have more Wi-Fi activity than we have public computer activity. So we're the place where people plug in to the internet. We're obviously a place where people who love reading can find things that they want to read. We are a schoolhouse. Our programming is very focused, typically on early childhood literacy, on educational success, and then workforce development. But we're a schoolhouse. We're an extension of the school day. We are a third place, as you said earlier. We're a place that people can go connect with other people. We see a number of retirees in our branches, and they're coming to the library because it's safe and it's free, and the people are friendly, and they have things there that they can't get at other places, and they like to connect with other people who they might share common interests. We are the community's scrapbook. Right down the hall is the Robinson Spangler Carolina Room, and it's the largest repository of print archives in the Carolinas. And so it's really the scrapbook for our community, and a place where people can go do research, whether it's on their families or things about Charlotte. We're a small business center. I was at a branch one day. There was a fella in the room with the door closed, but I could see through the window, and he was walking around the room with index cards. I was trying to imagine what he was doing, and I finally decided that he was probably working on a sales pitch or something, or a speech to a group or whatever. So that's what he was using the library for. So we can be a lot of different things for a lot of people.
Lee, among the people who use the library are citizens who are otherwise homeless, mm-hmm. who camp outside the main branch, mm-hmm. and stay inside the building during the day.
Yep. What
do you say to people who, for whatever reason, are uncomfortable sharing space with people who are homeless in the library?
That's a good question. And, it's first of all, they're customers and have every right to be here, just like anybody else. They almost universally, I won't say universally, but almost universally, they respect and appreciate the opportunity to be here in this space, and they treat it with that, and they treat the space and the people in the library the same way, with respect. We call them our day customers because a lot of times they come for the better part of the day. And we've done some interviewing, and so we have some data. They're not all homeless. They may be more transient than homeless, but they clearly have challenging circumstances, whether they have a roof over their head that evening or not. We have programming specifically for them, and we will continue to serve them. When we do the new main library, when we design the new main library, we will design space that makes them feel welcome and continues to serve their needs, which could be different than needs that you might have or I might have in the library. We'll also be conscious about strategies and spaces for people who aren't part of that group, and today, for whatever reason, might be discouraged from coming here. So we want everybody to come to the library. So we'll need to be thoughtful about all the different customer groups that we're trying to attract. But libraries are free for all, and that means all. And so we are grateful for that patronage and customer base, and we'll continue to serve it the best way we can.
Let's talk about the main library. What is the working vision for it?
Late in the year, a year ago, we realized that one thing we were missing is what probably made Imaginon so successful, and that was a thematic vision at the top of the house. That vision for Imaginon was bringing stories to life on stage and in books. And it informed the partnership, the collaboration with Children's Theater, programming that we do together and separately, books and materials, the design of the building, everything. By late in 2016, we've planned the inside of the new main library 3 or 4 times from the bottom up. But what we were missing was that vision. And so we were fortunate to attract a grant from the Knight Foundation and did, with the help of outside consultant, ideation consultant, we did some work on what that vision might be. We looked at a number of different possible visions, and there were 3 sort of finalists. 1 is, and 2 are things that we do today, and we will continue to do it at the main library. But and those 2 things are Opportunity Central, which takes a lot of the work we do around workforce development today and reframes that. And so we'll be a place where will be a resource for people who are working at one stage or another of the whole workforce equation. Then there's the work that we do in lifelong learning, and that will continue to be an important part of what happens, and we call that People's University. We major in those 2 things at all the other libraries, and they will continue to be significant activities and investments here at Main Library. But here at Main Library, we will minor in those 2 things, and we will major in something that we call public commons. And public commons is about how do we use this facility to contribute to a stronger community, to build a stronger community. And it will manifest itself a lot of different ways. Kind of the model that made the most sense to me as we were working on this with our ideation partner was kind of a Maslow's hierarchy. And at the bottom of the pyramid is access. And so this library, the new main library, will continue to provide access to information and resources and books and everything. That's at the foundation. The next level up is grow. Some people, hopefully many people, will use access to those resources to grow themselves and their prospects in life, whether it be on the professional side or in other ways. And that's really Carnegie 101, Andrew Carnegie 101. That's why he invested in almost 2,000 libraries around the country. The tip of the pyramid, though, is participation. And so a home run, and something that we would celebrate, is people come to the library, they use the resources to grow and become the best version of themselves, and then they choose to participate in the active civic life of the community. And in the course of that, they and the community become the best version of themselves. In terms of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, it's in programming. A good example is the work that you do with your podcast. It's the opportunity for people to come in and see one of those recorded live, or to live stream a city council meeting and then have a talk back afterwards, or to play off of something that happens next door at the Carolina Theater, or across the street at Discovery Place, or across the street at the Lee Museum in the New South, or somewhere else in the neighborhood, and then to have a follow-on program that plays a riff off of what happened across the street. Another thing is that we're piloting now. When somebody joins a new organization, he or she will typically go through some sort of onboarding experience. But what's interesting is that when people come into our community, there's not a very formal opportunity to do that, formal or informal. And so we're working with some partners to develop a program like that is specifically targeting people who are new to the community, and it becomes their onboarding experience where they learn the kinds of things that are necessary to acclimate yourself to a new community. That's something that we'll do from this side as well. So I think the public commons, we've only begun to dream about how that manifests itself, but we are convinced that there's a need in our community, an opportunity for someone to play that role. So we plan to do that here at the main library.
Lee, the library has retained an all-star team of architects.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about them?
One, they have met, if not exceeded, our expectations so far for the process they're using, the questions they're asking, the people that they want to engage in the process. They want to talk to more than just those of us who work here at the library. They may have begun doing a little bit of work in pieces, but they've not shared that with us, and that's fine because we're not at that part of the process. But I can tell, and others can tell, from the questions they ask, the work they've done before, the little half ideas that they bounce off of us, they're brilliant. I mean, they're gonna create a great solution for this space.
The design architect is Snøhetta.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about them?
They're an international firm with headquarters in Oslo and New York. They've done some very impressive work. The Alexandria, Egypt library, which was one of the first libraries in the world, they redesigned the rebuilding of that, and they opened in 2002. They designed, along with the other two members of the team, which are Clark Nexon, architect of record, and then Brightspot, the community engagement partner. The three of them work together on the Hunt Library at NC State, and so they have experience working together. They collectively created some very innovative features in that library. They did the pedestrian changes to Times Square, very innovative. They also did, for the foodies who are listening, they did an expansion. They designed an expansion to the French Laundry restaurant out in California, which is a treat. And they're doing some other libraries. They're wrapping up a library in Calgary right now with a light rail line that goes through it. They're wrapping up a library on the campus of Temple University, and they're doing some smaller libraries in the New York area. So they're comfortable doing library work, but they're not just a library design firm. They're really quite brilliant, and they have helped us in ways that I won't describe to you, but that have the effect of building support for the project. And so their value to us goes beyond what they're going to design.
Lee, what they have designed, the Hunt Library, the Ryerson in Toronto, the Calgary Main Library, are spectacularly modern buildings. Will we limit or restrict their designs in any way?
No, because they will do what the market and the community, they will feed off of the community and the market, and they will design something that will be good for us here in Charlotte. It won't take much to be more modern looking than the building that we have, so that won't be a challenge for them. But I would expect it to be modern. I would expect it to have a lot of glass, so the inside and the outside are connected better than today. This building was built for books. The new building will be built for people. We're hopeful that they can find a way to connect the library space with the McGlowan Theater next door in some way, shape, or form. We think there's a unique opportunity to do that. So we're very excited about the path that they're on, and we'll have the space program completed by probably the 1st of March, and then we'll have the conceptual design completed by midsummer next year, and that's when we'll know and we'll be able to share with others what the library's going to look like.
Charlotte's not known for having leading-edge, iconic architecture. There are traditionalists who will want columns and brick. Will there be support for those new designs when the traditionalists rear their head?
Well, I think probably any good architecture won't please 100% of the people 100% of the time. But I think they'll design something that's a great solution for our community. And we can't wait to see what they come back with.
How will the project be funded?
Public and private dollars, so it'll be a public-private partnership. We were fortunate to be given $65 million of public dollars in the capital investment program that the county commission approved last June. All of those dollars won't go into the library itself, because some of them will fund the construction of an off-site support services center where we will send roughly about a third of what is in this building today, starting with the trucks and the loading dock for the books that we move around. So there are functions that don't have to be here. And so we'll move about a third of the current program to the Sports Services Center. But the vast majority of that $65 million will go into the facility here. Our Library Foundation is working on the private side of things to raise dollars for a variety of purposes, but leading with dollars that go into this building. We've committed to the county that will put at least $15 million of private money into the main library project. And we haven't set a goal yet for what we're going to try to raise because we're waiting to see the final program of the library that comes, the space program. So we'll make that decision later in the year, next year.
The Carolina Theater, the Discovery Place, the new main library will all be across the street from each other. Is that a good thing?
Yes, it is. You're probably familiar with something called the Knowledge Quarter in London, which is a much bigger area than our North Tryon area, maybe 3 times the size. So it's bigger, but a half dozen of us went over to see this thing in our own eyes. And it was really interesting to see the magic that you can create with nonprofits and media companies and cultural organizations and technology companies and research institutes and the British Library and the British Museum and this, that, and the other. I think our North Tryon can be a smaller version of that. And much like they're doing there, we are blessed here in the North Tryon area with some really strong institutions to start that process. So it's a good thing, we think, it's a good thing to have neighbors like that. One of the things that we've asked architects to be sure and do is to connect our new library building with our perimeter, because we're not very connected architecturally today. And so it's a little harder to connect like we want. But the new library will physically and architecturally connect with the perimeter around us. And so having those neighbors in the neighborhood will be advantageous to us in that respect.
When might we expect a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the completed main library building?
Most likely 2023, and we think we probably will not break ground until 2020. And we've made an assumption, we think conservative assumption, that it may take 3 years to build and open the new building. So we're penciled in 2023. It could happen faster than that. Some things have to fall in place, but it could happen faster. So for now, that's sort of the timeline we're on.
Lee, I'd like to talk about you. I understand your family can be traced back to 1706 in South Carolina. What do you know about those early Keeslers?
Not much, to be honest with you. Actually, I know that data point that you just shared from our own Carolina room staff who did that research. The Keesler family showed up in Mecklenburg County in the late 1800s. So 3 generations of that before me were involved in the savings and loan and financial services business. And it was the oldest savings and loan in North Carolina, and ultimately did a voluntary conversion into what is now First Citizens. But that was sort of the business that my family were in. My maternal grandfather was an engineer and helped build Camp Lejeune 1,000 years ago. My mom's family actually was from over in Gaston County in Belmont, and my dad's family had really was here for several generations.
Tell me about your dad.
My dad is deceased. He died in the early 2000s, and he was one of 4 boys, and he and my mom had 4 boys. He was a good businessman. He was a great father, and he exposed us to all the things that you'd think boys would be exposed to in sports and so forth. He was a really good tennis player. He and his 3 brothers all played tennis in college at Davidson. They all went to Davidson. They were all really good players. They were Junior Davis Cup level players. And he and his brothers, my uncles, helped the next generation find their way to the tennis courts along the way. Yeah, he was a really kind and gentle man. We were talking about actually at Thanksgiving. We do this thing about 3 brothers and I. When we get together at Thanksgiving and also at Christmas, we have what we call Keesler Family Trivia. And it's our way of passing on to the next generation information about their family. And so we'll ask questions and then we'll answer the questions for them. And so we were talking about Dad. And he was a kind and gentle person. He really was.
And your mom?
She was the disciplinarian in the family by default. She was an only child who landed in a family that had 4 boys, and then she had 4 boys. And so that was a lot. She was a part of creating something that was very different from the experience that she had. She was really close to her dad, who died early. She passed away a couple years after my father, And her mom actually passed away a year later than she did. So her mom, my grandmother, passed away at age 101 and actually outlived her daughter. Mom took us to the library growing up. And so what's now the Myers Park Library was then the South Branch Library. I can remember we would walk up the street. We could walk there, and she would walk us up there, and we'd load up on the stuff that we liked to read, and then we'd put the books in one of those red wagons, and then we'd pull the wagon back to the house. But she introduced us all to reading. She knew that was important, and it may be that initial experience with the library that is part of what's drawn me to this role now.
So you're one of 4 brothers. Mm-hmm. Are you the oldest?
I'm the second. My older brother, Bill, was a newspaper reporter and editor for a number of years in Greensboro and Norfolk and Louisville and Lexington, and then came back to Lexington, North Carolina. He was a Morehead Scholar at UNC. My immediately younger brother is a psychologist and therapist. And then my youngest brother, David, is a federal judge down the street from where you hang out at Johnson & Wales. He was also a Morehead Scholar. So we're all pretty different in terms of the professions that we've chosen, but all of us are in our own ways involved in our community and believe in the stewardship of giving back to one's community. So we've all done different things, and for me, the library is a part of that. It's not all of it, but that's an important part of being here.
How would you say you're different temperamentally?
My older brother, Bill, is the best behaved and the kindest. So he would have some of that from our father. My youngest brother, David, grew up. He was a good bit younger than the other three of us, and so he grew up a little, not as an only child, but after, and so he was very close to Dad as well as our mom, and he's a solid citizen. And then my brother Tom was actually probably. I had the benefit, let me just say it this way, I had the benefit of one of the oldest brothers ever in my brother Bill, and he was very supportive of his younger brother. I wasn't quite as gentle and supportive of my immediately younger brother, and so we were all different, but this is the part I think our parents will really be happy about today, is that we remain connected, and after a period of years when both Mom and Dad died, and we spent a fair amount of time together in that sort of circumstance, we just decided to keep up the connection. And so actually this weekend we go to Lexington for where my older brother is to have barbecue Christmas, which is a routine for us every year. And it's been fun to have relationships with one another, even at this stage of life.
How would they describe you?
Wow. That's a good question. They would probably say that I am. I don't know the answer to that. I plead the fifth on that.
You grew up in Myers Park.
We actually grew up we started in Myers Park, not far from the tennis courts at Freedom Park. Then we moved over into Eastover, and then we moved out into the I went to East Mecklenburg, so out off of Sardis Road, near where Randolph runs into Sardis, and we were in a new residential development with a lot of young families, and just a fabulous place to grow up with a lot of friends from school.
What were you like in high school?
Well, I was probably not as aware as I am today, self-aware. As I am today. I was, like everybody else, just kind of trying to get by. I was following a brother who had really strong achievement. He was a Morehead Scholar, and he was the president of the student council. And so I had sort of a model to follow. And there were times when that was really fulfilling, and there were times when that was challenging. But, I was, like everybody else, motivated on the academic side to make sure I had opportunities beyond high school, and I also enjoyed sports. In particular, I sort of gravitated toward golf, which is probably a conversation altogether, that in a family of tennis players that I ended up really focusing on a different sport.
What were your ambitions when you were younger?
I don't know. I don't know how I would respond to that, because I think they were all immediate term. one of the things I wanted to do in college was I wanted to play college Division I college golf, and I had also, my mother went to Duke, and I'd had a chance to go to basketball camp up there, and I got subconsciously programmed early on in life that was sort of an attraction. And then when I realized I could play Division I golf there and get a good education and not be too far away from home and all that, then that became sort of a goal of mine. And so I was motivated to do the schoolwork to do that.
How good were you?
I was good enough to win some tournaments in college, but not good enough to do anything with my golf, at least at a professional level after school.
Did you think about playing golf professionally?
Not really. And therein lies the I think for whether it's to be a professor in college or to create a media company or do anything professionally, anything specific professionally, I think you really have to be passionate about doing that, passionate and pretty focused, and that's a common element in anybody who's achieved at a really professional level. And so I didn't quite have that passion.
You studied economics at Duke,
Mm-hmm.
and then you went to Wake Forest for your MBA.
Yep.
And from there you went into banking.
Mm-hmm.
Why banking?
I felt like banking was a great place to learn a lot about just sort of how business operates, and was a good blend of, depending on the role, a good blend of sort of marketing and interpersonal kinds of skills, and then analytical skills. And it was also by virtue of what my dad had done, the financial sector was, I kind of saw it through his eyes as being a good place to learn. Mm-hmm. Later on in my career, probably in my early 30s, I could for the first time kind of see longer term how I might develop. And the choice of going into banking was an effective first of 3 chapters. And I thought at some point in time, maybe in my early 40s, around the age of 40, what I might like to do is go into a smaller environment, maybe with some people I knew, and to take a business and create something from it. And then the 3rd chapter, I wanted to do something more directly involved in the community because I cared about Charlotte.
The first President Bush often said that there are 3 chapters in life: learn, earn, and serve.
Yep, that's pretty close to what I was describing.
Yeah. How long did you stay in banking?
Until I was 50, so I was 24 years. I spent at First Union, then became Wachovia after the Wachovia merger, and loved the people and the company, but I had missed the 2nd chapter, and so I was still at age 50 I was still there in chapter 1, and then an opportunity to throw myself into the community came, and it probably was a couple of years early, not many. I think I probably had a couple of years of energy and ideas left in my role at the bank, but you can't always pick your timing. Mm-hmm. And so threw my name in the hat for the ASC CEO role and had a great 5 years there.
Do you think of yourself as a banker?
No.
Did you think of yourself as a banker when you were in banking?
I'm sure there were times I probably did, but I don't know today, and I probably didn't know then what that meant, a banker, because there's so many different things within financial services now that what I did for most of my career was work with businesses, was to manage relationships with businesses. That's really what I thought of probably myself more than anything else was I was a partner to businesses and providing resources. And when my customers were successful, hopefully because of something that I introduced them to or helped them with or whatever, that was really what gave me the satisfaction.
During those many years when you were at the bank, was there another part of your personality that you felt was going unexpressed?
Not so much unexpressed. At the bank was very involved in the community and encouraged its employees to be involved in the community, whatever that meant to a particular individual. And I had, by virtue of some of the roles I played, I had responsibilities in the community. And I logged a lot of time working with different organizations in the community. And as time went on, it was that muscle that I felt like at the right time that I wanted to exercise more. And that was in line with this sort of longer view of where I thought I wanted to go. So it was the time that I spent while I was at the bank working in the community that I think ultimately sort of sealed for me how I wanted to finish professionally and more directly involved in the community.
You could have stayed in banking over the next 15 years and had quite a lucrative finish. Why the change?
Frankly, wanting to do something or things that were meaningful in a different way than what I was doing. It was. I've had a lot of conversations with people since those days when I made that move, because there are a lot of people in the private sector who entertain thoughts of that move, and there are a lot of things that impede people from doing that. And economically, it was a significant impact to our family, and it would be for others, or some of the people I was having conversations with. It would be for them as well. So, you have to really be all in to want to make that change. But I've never looked back in terms of when I left the bank and why. And I've had two really great experiences since then, one in the cultural sector and now here at the library. And it kind of gets back to that mission statement again about building a stronger community. I feel like the work that we are doing here is we are improving lives and we are building a stronger community. And at this stage of my life, that's more important to me than some other things.
You became president of the ASC. How did that come about?
There was somebody in that role before, and she left. And the board was looking for an individual to come in and lead the organization, and they weren't necessarily looking for an arts administrator. And in fact, maybe were specifically looking for something other than an arts administrator at that moment. And I became aware of it and knew some of the people who were involved in the search, and so I threw my name in the hat. It was an important, don't want to over dramatize it, but it was a watershed kind of a moment. And to her credit, Gerald was very, very supportive of it.
And Gerald's your wife?
Yeah, and we had a number of conversations along the way about what longer term, what do we both want to do with our professional experiences and talents and abilities. But she was very supportive of the decision, and then when I went into the role, she was very supportive of me in the role and the demands of the role.
Is there a particular memory you have of your time at the ASC?
It was a little bit like going back to school and getting a master's in arts administration, and I left with great respect for all the artists and the people who put on art, and I include science and history with that as well. I met wonderful people and learned a ton, and it was a part of my education that I never tapped early on. And then I had an opportunity to learn a lot about the cultural sector from people who were in it every day and wouldn't give that up for anything.
It was your first role as a CEO. What did you learn about yourself as a leader?
Well, what I'd learned before at First Union and then First Union Wachovia, we used to think and express leadership as very simply as creating followership. And to step into an industry that I wasn't from, and lacked the educational pedigree and all that, that was a great challenge to get people to follow you who knew a heck of a lot more about the body of work than I did. And some days we would win, and some days we would draw, and some days we would lose, but we'd get up the next day and go at it again. So, but it was also a time that was pretty rich because the cultural sector was changing, even if it didn't realize it already was, and it has changed further since then. And so those 5 years, there was a lot of change that we were going through.
What would you say are your strengths as a CEO?
I think probably a comfort level of looking peripherally and down the road and understanding direction and trajectory and pace. And generally speaking, I feel comfortable that I can have us on the right direction. It takes a lot of hands to row one of these boats, and we have a great team here. And I've learned a lot from that team. I've learned a lot from our other staff. But I'm probably at my best when I'm looking, like the work that we did about 2025, and knowing what questions to ask, and how to chart a course to get there.
What would you like to get better at?
That's a great question. I think a great thing for people to say about any of us is he made the people around him better, or she made the people around her better. And sometimes you don't have to do a lot. Sometimes it's almost as much what you don't do as it is what you do to make that happen. And so that'd be a nice thing if people were to say that, at some point in time, that he made those of us who were working around him, better at what we did or enjoyed our jobs more.
Lee, you left the ASC in 2009 during the recession. Was that the right time to leave?
Well, I actually went to our board chair a year before that, and I said, I'm going to do one more year. If the board wants me to do one more year, I'm going to do one more year. And I felt like with the amount of change, and at that point in time, this would have been July of 2008, the world had not crashed at that point, but did shortly thereafter. I remember our board chair at the time asked me, he said, what are you going to do? And I said, my goal when I leave here 12 months from now is that I won't have any idea what I'm going to do next. And I saw it as an opportunity to, frankly, an organization like ASC at the time, an organization like this one, we are stewards of these community organizations, and to outstay my time in these roles is being unfair to the organization. And so I felt like the time would be good in the cultural sector for new leadership. And so went to our board chair and said, a year from now, so that gave the board plenty of time to do a thoughtful search for my successor.
Who is the Lee Keesler we don't see?
He probably has some of his dad's. I remember growing up, Dad and I, in the fall in particular, we would be out in the yard together, usually raking leaves. But we would raking leaves, listening to a football game on the radio, on one of these little transistor radios at the time. And that was pretty sweet time. Now, that's pretty simple life, but that's probably the part that people don't see is it just, I may look complicated at times, but I don't know that I am.
When you have free time, how do you like to spend it?
Getting exercise, which it gets harder and harder at 63. I still play a fair amount of golf. That's sort of my art form, and it's something like an artist. It's something that I can still get better at, so that's kind of fun to play around with that. The best time that I spend and we spend as a family is when we're together, generally traveling somewhere. But it could also be just sitting around at home at holiday time when everybody is home, and having a glass of wine together, and talking about our lives and that kind of thing. So that's the most meaningful time is when we're together as a family.
Is there a golf course you'd like to play that you haven't played?
No, actually not. I've had a chance to play a number of places in Scotland, and this past year went with some friends to Ireland. And I haven't played all the great golf courses in the world, and never will. I've played some really good ones, and if I stopped today, I wouldn't be dissatisfied with the experiences that I've had. There is a course in sort of the northern Highlands of Scotland called Dornoch, and an individual grew up in that town named Donald Ross, who became a golf course architect and actually designed Charlotte Country Club here in Charlotte. I had an opportunity to play that course in 2015 after reading about it for years and years and years and years. And even after all the build-up, it was if you're a golfer and you imagine that you get to heaven and that there's a place to play golf there, it's Dornoch.
You are the CEO of the library. What are you reading?
I read a lot of different stuff, and I was telling a group the other day, I like three genres in particular. One is books about music, and specifically popular music, and specifically sort of rock and roll, because when I was growing up and became interested in music, it was a really rich time. And so there's a book in the library that I'd recommend called Fire and Rain, and it's about the breakup of the Beatles. It's about 1969 and 1970. The breakup of the Beatles, the breakup of Simon and Garfunkel, the crack up of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, the ascension of James Taylor, and all that was going on at one time. And since I've read biography of Eric Clapton and Carole King's so I really like reading about that era, the artists from that era, and then I share that information with our children to fill in the blanks a little bit for them in terms of the development of music. So I like that. I like reading, I've read all the Daniel Silva kind of international spy thrillers, terrorism, and all that kind of stuff. Since he writes a book a year, and I've read all of his books since 2009, and I really enjoy all of what he brings, because he brings the arts in his books. He must be an artist, because the art is also always a theme in the books. The other thing I like reading is I like reading books about women by women. And I was telling a group that I was speaking to recently about this, and you may be, present company excluded, you may be an expert in this thing, but most men don't know all they should know about how women tick. And I mean it in a very positive sense. And so I like reading books by women about women, about particularly characters that change over the course of the book.
What books come to mind?
The JoJo Noyes books. She wrote one that was about a woman who takes care of a fellow who's I guess quadriplegic and in a wheelchair. But it's through her eyes, and then the sequel book. But then there are other books that I've read, and I also like books on tape or on CD in the car while I'm driving around. And reading a book by a woman, about a woman, and read by a woman, I think is really interesting. And so,
you may be getting your share of Christmas gifts after that comment.
Perhaps.
Is there a hidden musician or artist or novelist in you?
No, unfortunately, I don't think so.
Lee, thank you for your time today.
Sure.
If you were to sum up by saying what's important to you, what would you say?
We're all stewards for life as we know it in this community today, and someone else will take our place, whatever we happen to be doing. Someone will take our place, and so leaving it better than we found it, I think, is really important to me. And sort of related to that, and I talk about this a little bit at the library, is just getting better every day. If we get better and better and better and better every day, then we don't have to worry about winning such an award or whatever, because we know if we're getting better all the time that we're going to achieve long term.
Thanks, Lee.
Yep. Thank
really
you for having me.
Yeah. Lee Keesler is president and CEO of the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library. He holds an MBA from Wake Forest University and a BA in economics from Duke University. And now, a personal word. I have been drawn to libraries my whole life, from reading books in cubbies in elementary school to making a beeline to see the lions in the reading room of the New York Public Library, to curating libraries of my own on bookshelves in every place I've lived. Books feed my mind and soul and inform who I am at my best. I am happiest when I am learning and when I am surrounded by people who feel the same way. I have two distinct memories from years ago of time in libraries. One was at Horace Mann Middle School in El Portal, a suburb of Miami in the mid-1970s. It was a public school that I would walk about a mile to from my home in Miami Shores. The school population was high poverty, roughly 80% African American, 15% Hispanic, and about 5% Caucasian. This was the time of patches on flared jeans, afros, and black power in integrated schools. I was among just a few students who looked like me. I joined the library club, students who would shelve books and create posters and suggest books to read for fellow students. We were all under the watchful eye of the school librarian, Mr. Richard S. Cook II. Mr. Cook was a middle-aged, African-American, flamboyant, cultured educator who alternated between being stern and making us laugh and who wrote poetic verses in our yearbooks. Mr. Cook was helpful and generous and irascible as school librarians are. He saw something in me. He encouraged me to strive for more. We talked a lot. We later wrote holiday cards to each other, and I have regard and fondness for him to this day. My second distinct memory is late nights at the Florida State University College of Law Library in Tallahassee, Florida. Between 1988 and 1991, the cutting edge of legal research was LexisNexis and Westlaw, proprietary databases of state and federal case law. Westlaw representatives who would tour law schools would come to our campus to teach us how to use the database. But we made our bones as lawyers pulling case law from dusty books off the shelves. We would spend hours late into the evenings at tables and carols under fluorescent lights with stacks of books, noting citations and references, hunting down precious volumes, annotating, writing arguments on legal pads, and always falling asleep with our head down on the pages until we were stirred again. The Horace Mann Middle School Library, and later the Florida State College of Law Library, and every library I have ever been in has offered knowledge and inspiration and the encouragement to go far. I think of the work that Lee Keesler and his team are doing to transform the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library and provide a center of opportunity, a people's university, and a public commons for all citizens of the region. Free and open access to the world's information that brings us together, that teaches us literacy, that is the scrapbook of our community, that helps us find jobs and start companies, that provides refuge and sanctuary, that welcomes immigrants and newcomers, that is an extension of the schoolhouse and school day. There is no greater act of citizenship for us to support. And now the opportunity to house it all in iconic architecture in the center of the city of Charlotte. Lee Keesler and his team have invited architects and designers and community engagement specialists to work with citizens to re-envision and create a new main library that transforms the streetscape and the human possibilities of the city. A public library that is the center of community life is a statement that all of us matter. That is community stewardship that all of us can and should embrace. This is Mark Paris, and you've been listening to On Life and Meaning. Thank you to my partners Andy Go, producer of the show, and to Chris Curriton, art and media director. This is how you can help. Please write a review on iTunes. It helps us grow our audience. Follow us on Facebook. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. And become a patron. We are on Patreon, a crowdsourcing platform that allows you to support what you value. Visit us also on our website, onlifeandmeaning.com. Thank you for listening.